Okay, so we're back, continuing to go through David Foster Wallace. This first big paragraph, it's the second paragraph in the whole thing. Sounds to me, I'm a I have a hobby. One of my hobbies is eating too much. I know it doesn't seem like it because I work out all the time, but I love food. One of the reasons I love living in New York City is because the food is so good. Um, and I eat all over the city. If somebody says there's a good restaurant somewhere, I will travel in New York City to go check it out. Most when I see friends, what we love to do is just meet at restaurants and just spend hours eating food. And New York's a great town for food. It's really one of the best towns for food, and it's pretty incredible for food. So for a person like me, reading the second paragraph of David Foster Wallace, it makes me hungry. It sounds like the best time in the world. Like I definitely want to eat lobster rolls, lobster turnovers, lobster saute, down east lobster salad, lobster bisque, lobster ravioli, deep fried lobster dumplings, and lobster thermidor. I want to have all of those things. They sound delicious. Um, by the way, now a couple of things to keep in mind. A lot of New York City offers some pretty good lobster options if you're interested. Now, you can get lobster at fancy restaurants, where but you're talking about lobster at fancy restaurants can be anywhere between, it can be like $60 to $100 a plate. They're pretty expensive to eat. You get these tools and you crack open the claws and you tear it apart, and because lobster meat is expensive. There are places you can go that are cheaper to get lobster. Luke's Lobster and Red Hook Lobster Company are two of the best if you're interested in eating lobster in New York City. Now, what they will give you is lobster meat on a hot dog bun. It's expensive though. It's like you're getting something about the size of a hot dog, but it costs, instead of costing $3 like a hot dog does, it costs like $22. Um, so it's certainly a little bit expensive to eat. It's very good. Sometimes they would even have a lobster truck that will drive around. And I've seen them near BMCC. Not this summer. I haven't seen it in a while, but like a year ago, they had like a Red Hook lobster truck right at BMCC, and you could go up to the guy and give him $22, and he give you a lobster roll to eat. And they're fucking delicious. They're very good. I recommend trying it at least once in your life if you haven't done it. Although a lot of lobster is shellfish. And so for a lot of religions, Judaism, for example, lobster is one of those animals like pigs that you don't eat. And so that's just another thing to keep in mind for this thing. Is not everybody eats lobster. It's forbidden in some religions for being a sort of unclean animal. They had a list of animals that were unclean in the ancient world, and so kosher laws, for example, were created because of it was thought that sort of pigs and shellfish were sort of unclean, and there was also rules about eating milk and meat together for kosher Jews. Um, I'll maybe say a little bit more about that later. One thing I will say now is that one of the things, if you're not allowed to eat lobster because you're Jewish, for example, um, food codes like that where you're allowed to, like, if I'm Jewish and I'm not allowed to eat lobster and my friend is not Jewish, then there's a bunch of restaurants I can't go to with my friend. And there's different levels of this. Sometimes people won't eat at the restaurant where lobster is served, but sometimes they just will go to the restaurant, but they won't order lobster. The point is that one way of thinking about food is that it binds communities together. Um, if your religion has a certain kind of food you're supposed to eat, then when you go to that restaurant, it's going to be filled with people of your religion. Or if you, right, so for example, like you're not going to see a lot of Jews. Well, it's not true because of course a lot of people don't observe, but observant Jews don't eat sort of pork, and so you won't see them in a pork restaurant. Um, because one of the things food codes do is if you're supposed to eat a certain way, it encourages you to eat with your own group, because if you go outside your group, they're not going to eat the same foods you're going to eat, and you might not be able to have it, right? So if you come over to my house and I'm cooking a lobster, I have cooked lobster, by the way, and we'll talk about that more because this is an article about cooking lobster. um, Food rules keep communities together. If your religion says you're not allowed to eat this kind of food, it encourages you to eat with members of your own religion. And of course, eating has a lot to do with friendship and bonding and community. And so, one of the reasons religions have these things, they may have started off at one point about hygiene. Um, but it's not about that anymore. The kind of biblical commandments about what kind of food you're allowed and not allowed to eat, a lot of them work to keep communities together, to keep religious communities together. You don't go in that restaurant with those other people. You go into this restaurant with your people. Um, okay, I don't think I have a lot else to say. I don't think I need to describe. You can chop lobster up and put it in a salad. You can chop lobster up and put it in a soup. Those are some of the foods that David Foster Wallace is talking about, but that doesn't seem super important for our stuff. So I think I'm done with the first paragraph. Because you're being tested on this, it's very important that you ask me questions in the blog below. If anything about this is confusing, you tell me what it is and I will explain it. Because normally in class I would have you stop me to tell me what you don't understand, but if there's something confusing to you, you have to ask or you're not going to know. Like, for example, it occurred to me in the middle of this, I was like, maybe some of my students don't know what a lobster is. I think you do, but if you don't, let me know if you need more explanation on what a lobster is, or, I'm sure you can look up YouTube videos of people eating lobster and you'll see some stuff. Okay, this is only the introduction. We haven't gotten to sort of the larger, because philosophical. Right now, this piece feels like a magazine article suggesting you go to the festival. It sounds delicious. That is not what this is. It is not a magazine article suggesting you go to this thing. It is actually a work of philosophy, but we haven't gotten to the philosophy part yet, so there's very little to talk about. Let's take a look at the next part of the essay. The next part of the essay is one of those things David Foster Wallace loves to do, which is he loves to go into too much detail. And so what he's going to do is he's going to look at the specifics of lobster the way an expert would look at it. So the first paragraph is like general stuff about the lobster festival, and then he wants to tell you what a lobster is. For practical purpose, everyone knows what a lobster is. As usual, though, there's much more to know than most of us care about. It's a matter of what your interests are. Taxonomically speaking, now taxonomy is a word I bet you don't know. Taxonomy is Socrates dividing. Remember Socrates subdivides and subdivides and subdivides, right? That he takes something and says, well, this one thing actually has two parts. Taxonomy is naming. It means, so you think about lobster. That's like one kind of animal, but actually you can subdivide it into there's this kind of lobster, that kind of lobster. That's just like there's dogs. That's an animal, but then you can subdivide dogs into German shepherds and pugs and Labradors and whatever kinds of dog. It subdivides. The same thing with lobsters. See, people think, well, there's just one lobster, but there's not. There's lots of different kinds of lobsters. So he says, David Foster Wallace says, taxonomy. I can't even read it. Taxonomically speaking, meaning in terms of names, a lobster is a marine crustacean of the family Homeriidae, characterized by 5 pairs of jointed legs, the first pair terminating in large pincer claws used for subduing prey. So he's just really, this word here you don't really need. That's a technical science term. This is a crustacean. You could look that up, but it's a creature with like a hard shell that lives in the ocean. Like many other species of benthic carnivores, is again a kind of science term, but carnivores are meat eaters. I actually don't know what benthic means, so you guys should look it up and find out. I can't look it up right now and be on my phone at the same time. Like many other species of benthic carnivore, lobsters are both hunters and scavengers, right? Meaning that they hunt for food to eat, but they'll also just eat anything on the ground floor of the whatever. They're hunters and scavengers. They have stalked eyes, gills on their legs, and antennae. There are a dozen or so different kinds worldwide, of which the relevant species here is the Maine lobster, Homarus americanus. The Latin word for locust combined with the Old English word lope, which means spider. The point is that lobsters are basically giant sea insects, right? So he's talking about where the word comes from, and he says it comes from a word meaning locust, which is like a grasshopper, and spider, because they look like giant bugs. Like most arthropods, that's a kind of animal, they date from the Jurassic period. Biologically so much older than mammalia, they might as well be from another. Biologically so much older than mammalia, that's mammals, they might as well be from another planet. So he says here that that lobsters, he's just telling you about like where the word comes from. There are different kinds of lobsters, and they basically seem like giant sea insects. So I'm going to stop this video, and then I'm going to look up what some of those words mean, because I don't fucking remember, and I'll get back to you with what they mean.